Over the past 4 years, I have been on a journey of growth to reimagine dozens of words that I have found to be foundational to my relationships, my health and well-being, and nearly every other aspect of my life. This podcast is my invitation to you to join me in this journey. This is A Better Story. We are in week 3 of A Better Story, and for the third week in a row, I am joined by the incredible Michaela Rohrbough. I'm trying to get you in as much as I can before school starts in the fall, and I'm so happy to have you here again. How are you doing today?
So-so.
So. Oh man, why only so-so? Little low on energy?
I'm just tired today.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm happy to be here.
Hey, I am happy to have you here, tired or full of energy. I mean, none of us have COVID unless it's asymptomatic right now, so that is a blessing.
The jokes of these days.
The jokes of 2020, hey. Michaela, we are talking about the word good today, which is a strange word to talk about for 40 to 60 minutes. Which, if you didn't know, that's how long these podcasts are generally going to be. So there you go. But we are going to try to do it. And Michaela, one thing that I appreciate about you is I feel like when I met you, I had this notion that my concept of what was good was just things that really resonated with me. And you helped me kind of see that was kind of just the David idea of good, that there was like a bigger idea of good out there than just what I thought, whether it was about my faith, whether it was about performance or anything like that. So that's one thing I appreciate about you. But yeah, let's jump right into our discussion about good, which is not a very good word. It's a very cheap word. We like to start here on this podcast, as I'm sure you know, with 5 and 5. 5 seconds for your own personal definition of good. It could be a great definition, it could be a terrible definition, as long as it's your definition. And then 5 minutes to talk about your personal experiences with the word good. So you ready to go?
Sure.
All right, take it away.
Okay, this was a hard word for me to define. I think because it is, in our language today, it has several different meanings. But I think the way I would see good is something that is like causes positive benefits in the short run, in the long run, to yourself, to others, but something that has a positive benefit. So that could be like, eating healthy is good because it leads to benefits in your health. Saying hi to someone and being excited to see them is good because you're creating something positive for them. And I don't really know if I can define it any better than that for myself.
Hey, I like that. Something that has positive benefits. Like, I feel like it's such like a cheap word. You know, in school you learn like, oh, there's cheap words and then there's like expensive words. You know, the words that, you know, you'd only pay 1 cent to use, and there's the words that you'd pay like $5 to use. You know, words like good are like the 1 cent words, you know. How was your day? Oh, it was good, you know. But I like that. Something that has positive benefits. Okay, yeah, for sure. All right, 5 minutes. Personal experiences.
Well, one thing I did want to mention, going off of what you just said actually, is when I first thought about talking about this word, I thought of how every time someone asks me how I'm doing or how my day was, I say good pretty much before I even thought about it. Because it's just expected.
Good.
It's what people want you to say. And a lot of the times I think we say it without really knowing what we actually mean. And so when other people tell me they're feeling good, I don't even know what they mean. They could mean anywhere from, oh, this is a great, amazing day, all the way to, this is a terrible day, but I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I don't want to get into it, so I'm just going to tell you my day is good. So I think it's good as a word that it's really hard to understand what people mean when they say it.
It's a little bit ambiguous. Like when you say like it's good, it doesn't really mean anything. It's kind of like a one word catches all. One word okay.
Yeah. And I think also as I was thinking about the word good, the phrase that came to mind to me is the difference between what I see as good versus what's good enough. I feel like one of the times in my life that really helped redefine this word for me, it's actually a very small example, but I was listening to someone else talk about how it's easy to love people in like the expected ways. Like in our society, like there's an expectation of like, oh, like if you do this much, like then that's good. Versus choosing to love someone in a more, to use your phrasing, expensive way. That goes a step beyond and is sometimes an unexpected step, because in our society it's not necessarily like it goes beyond what you're expected to do. And my very small example of trying to do this in my life, this is the only one I could think of on the top of a hat, is I remember one day I was walking around downtown Davis, and this older woman asked me if I knew like how to take this bus to a different part of Davis. And so I told her, oh yeah, like get on like this number bus, and the bus stop is like down that way a couple blocks. And so she says thanks and like starts walking away. And I had this moment of being like, wait a minute, this is an opportunity for me to take the unexpected step. And so I like went back and I talked to her again, and I said, all I said was like, oh, actually, like, let me walk you to the bus stop to make sure you get there and make sure you get on the right bus. And she really appreciated that. And I think it was one of those, it's such a small instance of how I think good enough, like we pretty much know in our society what's good enough, like what's passable in terms of, oh, hey, I just give someone directions because they asked for it. I'm a good person, yay. And then there's the additional step of like going beyond what's good enough to what is, I would consider actually good and actually loving. Yeah.
I love that. I just heard the camera make a weird noise, and today our amazing producer Kay is out of the office. I'm gonna go check on the camera real quick.
Okay.
I will be right back. You can talk about whatever. It looks like we are still recording. All right. Sweet. Sorry for that brief interruption. Yeah, Michaela, I love that. I love how actually in sync we are, because when I was preparing for this last night, I pretty much everything you said were some of the talking points that I really wanted to go over. So wow, we are totally in sync with this one. I love that story about the bus. The one word that really stuck out to me was the word opportunity. You saw an opportunity to do good. And I want to come back to that word later on in this conversation, because I think that is an important word for me when I think about the word good. I'm going to move on to my 5 and 5. If you've been sticking with this podcast for a while, you know I have a lot of trouble keeping it down to 5 minutes. I'm going to try, and we'll see if it works. My 5 seconds, I'm pretty good with that one. My 5-second definition of good. Personally, I think of good as anything that's better than average. So I'm like a kind of a statistics, math, numbers kind of guy. So I tend to like kind of judge things like, what's the average, and anything that's better than the average I think of as like, oh, this is good. Anything better than the average. It's also pretty ambiguous. Like I said, I think the word good is pretty ambiguous. What makes something better than the average? It's so subjective. But that's kind of my David definition.
No, I think something about your definition that I was also dwelling on is like, if good is like being better than the average, then logically you would have to say that in order to be considered a good person, you would have to be in the top 50% of people in the world. And then it becomes an issue of like, well, what standard are you judging it by? Yeah. And so it's just really interesting because I feel like I could talk to almost anyone and ask them if they consider themselves a good person, and they would say yes. But then logically, if good is above the average, then it's impossible for everyone to say yes.
Yeah, and we're totally going to jump back into that. Michaela, you are literally hitting every single point that I really wanted to go over. But first, I want to get through my 5 minutes, and I'm gonna take my phone and actually set a stopwatch. I'm gonna do this week, Michaela. Okay. I am gonna get it within 5 minutes, starting now. Let's go. All right. So stories about good in my life. I have 2 stories. One is, this just hit me as so interesting. I probably should tell a story first. But because it's something I didn't realize was like an impactful life story for me until I thought of it yesterday. So when I was a kid growing up, people always told me like, David, you're such a good kid. Like, David, you're such a good kid. David, you're such a good kid. And I just kind of believed it. Like, yeah, I'm a good kid. I'm a good kid. And then in my home, it was exactly the opposite. David, you are such a rebellious kid. David, you're bad in this way. David, you're bad in this way. And fortunately for me, maybe fortunately, I believed what people told me instead of what I learned in my home, and kind of that allowed me some momentum. Since I believed that I was a good kid, I still strove. Is that the past tense of strive? Okay, we're on a roll. I still strove to do good, to grow. We talked about growth last week. I still had hope. We talked about hope 2 weeks ago. There we go.
Actually, now I think it's strived.
Strived? I still strived, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds better, yeah.
I still strived to be good. But the interesting thing for that is so many people told me, David, you're a good kid. And then this other group of people who were very close to me said, like, David, you're such like a terrible kid. You're so rebellious. You're so like X, Y, and Z. And that was happening at the same exact time with the same exact me. And I just, for me, like I never realized that was a reality of my childhood, that one like group of people would call me a good kid and the other group of people said like exactly the opposite. So that just like struck me as like, wow, that is my reality. That is what I grew up thinking of, like a good person. Second story. I'm gonna have
3 minutes left.
I am gonna get 5 minutes. All right. Yes. Second story. I was a senior captain of the lacrosse team. I was a pretty darn good lacrosse player, Michaela. I was 4th place in the state of California in assists my junior year, and I was on track to beat that my senior year until I tore my Achilles. But I was playing a game, and I was playing what I thought to be terribly. Like, I was not getting the ground balls that I normally get. I was a little bloated because I had some dairy. I'm lactose intolerant. It's just I was playing like what I thought was terribly. So like, I was getting tired, so I subbed out. And one of the sophomores, a guy named Jake, I still remember his name. I'm kind of impressed I remember it. He's like, hey man, you're playing great, and he just like slaps me on the shoulder. And my first thought was like, no, I'm playing terribly. So I like went to get some water, like sat down on the bleachers, and like I was thinking about like what he said, and I was like, I don't mean this as like a slight to him, but I was like, by his standards, I probably was playing pretty great, but by my standards, I was playing terribly, and it was like, well, I'm just gonna choose to take his standards for now because I don't want to be depressed about my own standards. I was like, yeah, like for the average player, like especially for like an underclassman in high school, like I'm playing pretty good. So like there's no reason to get down. And what I realized is like, you're doing well, you're doing great, like you are good. Like a lot of these things are so subjective, and sometimes we give ourselves these Herculean standards. I gave myself this Herculean standard, and by my standards, I was not doing good, and then by someone else's standards, like I was doing good. So it really like fundamentally shifted my idea of what encouragement was. And you've probably heard me bring up this story before in terms of encouragement, where sometimes people measure themselves by these like Herculean standards. And sometimes like you can honestly tell them like, no, you're doing good, because you can see from like a perspective that steps back that like, no, like, yes, by Herculean standards, you're not doing that great. But like, I think you are doing like good, because you don't need to judge yourself by Herculean standards all the time. And so that fundamentally shifted my idea of like the objectiveness of the word good, and really it helped me become a more encouraging person, which you might appreciate that, because I'm still not very encouraging in all that I say. And so like, I'm sure you appreciate that a little bit more. Let me check my time.
Yeah, I'm curious.
5 minutes and 30 seconds. I did it.
Are you done?
I'm done.
Okay.
That's it.
Good job.
Sweet.
High five for you.
Okay, I'll take it. So thoughts on that.
I think what really stood out to me in what you were saying is the idea of, I think a lot of it, okay, personally, I feel like the most important conversation we can have about the word good is about how do we define what is good, which I think is kind of like where we're going with it. And I think what you brought up in your story is how it really, the standards that we choose to define good by make a big difference in terms of where we land. And you can choose to measure yourself by your own standards, by other people's standards, by your perception of other people's standards. And it's going to make a big difference. And it makes it really hard to agree with other people on, because not everyone's going to agree that the same standards are right.
Right. And people tend to pick standards that put themselves in a better light. Like when
People 101.
People 101. One story, this is a personal story that I remember. So when I was in high school, there's a girl in my class, also named Michaela, spelled the same way as your name. If you're
Michaela, comment below. We gotta stick together, y'all.
Yeah, unless it's Spotify, then just let us know in another way. She was exceptionally gifted in art. We're talking like sophomore year in high school, she was already like by far the best artist in the school. And she wasn't that great in math. And I remember thinking to myself, like, man, I am so good at math. I am so good at science. Like, I am the epitome of what a good student is. And I remember thinking about like Michaela. I'm like, man, like, you know, she's not like a star in math. I mean, she wasn't bad, but she's not a star in math. She's not a star in science. And yeah, she's really good in art, but who cares about art? You know, it's math that matters. And what I realized, like, now that I'm removed from the situation, is like, no, like, she was literally the star of this school at a sophomore in art, but I discounted art as a measure of what makes something good because I was awful at art. I was terrible at art. And if I were to like allow art to be a measure of what makes someone a good student, like, I would have failed by that measure. So I just, discounted art as a measure of what makes someone like a good student or smart or whatever. And it wasn't like a choice that I made. Like, I wasn't sitting down at a table like, am I going to allow art in or am I not? Like, I just assumed that because it was something that I couldn't personally excel in, that it couldn't therefore be a measure of what's good. And I think it's so easy to do that because we are a people, humans who like to see ourselves in the best light. And it's so easy to come up with these standards that allow us to see ourselves in a really good light. And man, if I could go back, I would be so much more like affirming towards all my classmates, like, hey, like, you are great in art, and I think that makes you like an incredible whatever. Like, you are an encouraging person, and I think you are an amazing, like, just because in my mind at that time, like, I made my standards things that I could pass, and because of that, I saw a lot of other people in like a lesser light. And I was, I can't go back. I don't have like regrets about what I did, but it's something that I want to like grow moving forward. Is like, man, like, yes, I have my own standards, and realize that when someone doesn't match my standards, it's not because they're like bad. Maybe they are, but it doesn't imply that they're bad because they don't meet my standards. Like, I need to also realize the person I'm talking to like has their own standards. They have their own things they care about, right? I don't have, a wife, kids, family, things like that. If I'm talking to someone who does, like, they have to spend so much of their time, changing diapers. Maybe they're, they have like a 2-year-old kid. They wake them up in the middle of the night 3 times a night, and they can't be as good at video games or a hobby, or they can't have as much energy on a Zoom meetup as I can, because they have all these other things that are pulling them away. And if I were to judge someone who has crying babies at 2 a.m. at night by my own standards, like, of course I'm going to see them as like not good, because by my standards they're not. But in reality, like, my standards are not always the bar. They're very rarely the bar that is like, is the correct bar to judge. And so, yeah, that's some of my thoughts. I forget where this conversation started. I always do this. But do you have any thoughts about that? No?
Nope.
Okay. Something you had mentioned earlier.
Here, can I stand up?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome.
Something that you had mentioned earlier was this idea of opportunity. Well, you didn't really present it as an idea of opportunity, but that's the word that stuck out to me. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about opportunities to do good, or whatever else. I want to hear more about what you think about that.
Well, I would say that what makes you good as a person or good at something is not inherent in who you are, but it's in the choices that you make. So I would say that I would call someone a good person because of the choices that they make, and if those are good choices, if they choose to be loving, if they choose, like, especially when it's difficult, rather than like basically just the absence of doing bad things.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast a couple of weeks ago. It's called On Purpose. And it was talking about this idea of there's a lot that happens in your life, but your life has only so many events. An event is something that kind of like is really meaningful. So for instance, I went to school for 4 years, but really there was only a couple of events that I still remember that are still like impact me. One of them was the story about what happened to the lacrosse team, lacrosse game. That was an event that still impacts me today. One silly example of an event is when I got a drink of water from the water fountain. I used to like put both hands on the water fountain and then like lean over like this, and one of my classmates thought it was hilarious, and so she like laughed at me and she said, "Dude, you look so like ridiculous when you drink water." And like now to this day, whenever I drink water from a water fountain, I like remember that. So even though it was like something that to her and to everyone else in the school wasn't an event, it was just some random comment someone made. It's like, oh, that's still like, I still remember that. And it's like, now I realized like why she thought I looked ridiculous. And, I laugh at it because I did look kind of ridiculous. But it's still something that like I remember. So there's this idea of like, this is an event. And like, I think when you're talking about opportunities to do good, like those are so meaningful. And the reason I think those are so meaningful is because I think human beings are humans have this momentum where the first time you do something, the first time you work out, the first insert any word, like it's always the most difficult. It's always the most strange. It's always the most whatever. But the second time you do it, it's a little bit easier. It's a little bit less meaningful, a little bit less impactful. The third time is a little bit easier. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And there's this concept of momentum. Momentum is a physics term. If you're going in one direction, you're going to keep on going in that direction. And so you had brought up like this thing of like there's an opportunity to do good, and I really think that when you are face to face with this opportunity to do good, it will have been so easy for you, Michaela, to just say like, well, yeah, I could walk her to the bus stop, but she's not expecting it. Like, I have my own thing to do. Like, it might be an awkward situation. I'm just going to do my own thing. I'm pretty sure she can make it. And there's nothing wrong if you would have chosen that. But you chose to do the good thing. And I'm not, I don't know enough about, your story to know if you had like a history of choosing to do the good thing or not. But I really do think like, make that one choice to like do the good thing, and then make that choice again, and then make that choice again. And then it really will become easier over time. There is this very real concept of momentum, where if you choose to do the comfortable thing, if you choose to do the easy thing, it makes it so much easier to just choose the comfortable, easy thing the next time. If you choose to do the uncomfortable but good thing, and you choose to do it over and over again, like it makes it so much easier and more natural to do it again the next time. And so an opportunity is not just an opportunity in that moment. Like, I really do think that an opportunity is an event. It is something that has the potential to like shape your direction. Like, this sounds like hyperbole, but for the rest of your life, like the path that you choose. That's why it's so important that like kids go the right way, right? The path that you choose like affects what you choose the next time. It affects what you choose the next time. So that's some of my thoughts about opportunity, about events. I really want to encourage whoever's listening to this, like, just choose there's a train in the background. I'm sure everyone can hear that.
He's saying hi.
Just choose the good, uncomfortable thing just once. Like, just say like, well, no.
Hopefully more than once.
Well, too. I'm getting there. Like, but just choose it just once. Say like, no, I am gonna do this good thing once. I'm just gonna do it. And then the next time it comes around, say like, okay, I did it last time. I'm just gonna do it again. I'm just gonna do it again. And like, you will be shocked. I know, because I've experienced. There was a time in my life where it's like, man, I'm gonna be a great person. And I still have a lot of that, ideology. And it actually was so easy to choose into like doing like good things for people when I was already had that momentum behind me.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've been talking a lot. Go ahead. And
Oh, I was just gonna go off of that because I feel like a lot of the times choosing the good, uncomfortable thing can be a really small step, but still like not easy to want to do. Like, the example that immediately came to mind to me, I like to think in terms of practical applications, because if it's just a theory in my head but not something I can actually apply, then I won't do it. But I thought of like an example of something any of us, unless you live alone, any of us could do that is like a simple good step would be, next time your sink is full of dishes because other people haven't washed them yet, you just wash them all and you put them all away, and probably no one will even comment on it or really care. But still, it's like, I know for myself personally, I never want to do that. I just want to do my own because that feels good enough to just be responsible for my own stuff, rather than choosing to love and serve the people I live with and do something good by taking care of theirs as well. It could be start with something as small as that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what matters is being willing to start.
Yeah, or if your house has clean dishes all the time, take out the trash, wash the countertop, something like that. And even like an act like that, like you may never get acknowledged for it. Nobody might ever realize it was you that cleaned the dishes. But that doesn't make it any less of a good act. I would argue that if you're doing an act for other people and the other people won't even like give you praise for it, like that is a more like sacrificially loving like act. I would, if I were to rate the goodness of acts, I would put that pretty high up. Like something that even though you are not going to get any recognition, any praise for it, you choose to do it anyways. Mm-hmm. Like I think that is something that is almost universally considered like, ooh, that's pretty good.
Yeah. And then I feel like you're talking about the momentum. The next step would be like, okay, maybe the next day you do the same thing, even though you already did it once.
Oh, and even though nobody noticed. Oh. Challenges. # goals. Oh man. Well, let's talk about something that I feel like is related. Let's talk about what about when someone, or say you think there's something that's not good in yourself, but you choose to let other people see it. This idea of vulnerability. I think the general public perception is when you are in front of other people, show your good face and hide any part of you that could be judged as not good or as shameful or as anything like that. And yet, if you read so many like psychology articles, if you listen to like relationship advice experts, they will unanimously tell you that it is so important to have vulnerability in relationships. And we're not just talking about husband-wife relationships or parent-kid relationships. Like in relationships in general, like this concept of vulnerability is so important. And yet, side by side with that is this public perception, at least from what I think, my experience with the public, that you should really only show your good side. So does that kind of make sense? Mm-hmm. What do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, actually, I'll share a story from yesterday.
Ooh.
So I've mentioned before in this podcast that I'm starting school soon as a first year teaching. It's scary, especially since everything is up in the air. I have no idea what things are going to look like. Classroom management is going to be chaotic. It's just going to be rough, no matter what I do. Or it's going to be uncertain, no matter what I do. And yesterday in the morning, I was praying, and I was actually thinking a very similar thing of like, okay, like, I can't keep worrying about next week, next month, all the weeks after that. It's too much for me. It's overwhelming. I just need to focus on today. And I asked God, like, what is the good next step for me today? Even if it's small. I just I need to start focusing on the good next step today rather than getting overwhelmed by all the days after it. And what the indication I got was that when I went into school to be setting up my classroom and everything, I should ask the teacher next door to pray for me. And that might sound so easy, but it was hard for this reason of vulnerability, because especially as a new teacher, I want to show that I'm capable, that I can do this, that other people can count on me. But inside, I was terrified about starting out the school year and terrified of making mistakes and of failure.
Yeah.
And that was in my head all day yesterday when I was there. And I did ask her to pray for me, and it went great. And I think
Let me interrupt you real quick. This is a Christian school, so the other teacher is also a Christian.
yes,
Yeah,
that's good
okay,
context.
so keep on.
Yes, so it wasn't like I was asking someone completely random. But I think it was definitely the highlight of my day yesterday, especially because I feel like I had an opportunity to be honest with myself, with God, with this other teacher about how I was actually feeling about starting teaching. And I think the best part of vulnerability is when you do that and having it be received not as, oh, you're weak, you're not good enough, but as this is the best thing you could have asked for, is asking for prayer, asking for other people to come alongside and help you. And I hope I can continue that momentum throughout the year. I definitely want to try to. But I honestly do want to say every time that I have chosen to take the route of vulnerability and letting people see the places where I'm scared, parts of myself that I'm not proud of, parts of myself that I feel like other people could really disagree with or look down on me for, 100% of the time it has turned good. Almost 100% of the time. I'm not even making stuff 100% of the time. Maybe not immediately, but 100% of the time it has turned out for good. And I have gotten to know people so much more deeply, and there have been countless experiences where, because I was willing to be vulnerable in front of other people, even people I didn't even know, like even in front of a group of people I didn't know, that every time I did that, at least one person would come to me sometime afterwards and say that they felt inspired to do the same. That's my 2 cents about vulnerability, man. Like,
Hey, I love that. And, you mentioned this 100% success rate. I'm sure the first thing that comes to people's mind is like, well, it's not 100% with me. Which I'm sure that's nothing in this world is going to be 100% for every person all the time, right? But I think what I have whenever I see an opportunity to be vulnerable is I have this fear. The fear is, what if they don't accept me? I want to tell this person, even with you are so much better than me at vulnerability. Like, I have this fear, like, what if Michaela sees that about me and doesn't like it? And I think the thing that I need to say to that fear is yeah, what if? What if I tell you something about myself and, you don't really like that about me, Maybe my feet smell. Oh, you don't like that about me.
I don't know who would like that about anyone.
Right. But it's like, if I choose not to share it because you might not like that about me, I am holding myself back from you. I'm not even giving you the opportunity to accept me for all that I am and my smelly feet. But it's, what if I tell you my feet smell and you're like, oh, dang, that's, that sucks. What is lost? You understand me better for who I am, and that gives you an opportunity to be in deeper relationship with me. Even if we weren't dating, even if we're just friends. Man, we have just become closer friends because my feet smell. And there are some people that will they will burn you. They will tell all your friends yeah, his feet smell. You might have a reputation of having your feet smell. So do exercise some judgment. Don't take the most vulnerable, the most open wound in your life and share it with everyone who will listen to you, because that I'm sure that would be a less than 100% success rate. But if you see an opportunity for vulnerability and yes, there is that fear. Yes, there is some risk, but also ask yourself, ask that fear, what if? Your heart is beating. What if this happens? Yes, what if? I'd say 99 times out of 100. I'm not as bold as you. I say 100%. If you really ask yourself, what if? If whenever I ask myself, what if? It's yes. maybe like they will be disapproving of that particular thing, but they know me. They know David, and they're not going to say like, "Oh, that's who David is. He just has smelly feet," right? Or of course, there are things that are a lot harder to share than that. But what if? I think it gives other people a chance to know you better, to be in deeper relationship with you. And man, like during COVID times, like deeper relationships, I feel like that is the thing that is missing out, like for whoever you are. Deep relationships is something that is so good to have, especially now in this time.
And I feel like the importance of vulnerability, going off of your smelly feet example, I have no idea if your feet are actually smelly or not, so this is funny.
They're pretty good.
Is that if you were afraid of me, someone else, whoever, knowing that your feet were smelly, then and you didn't want someone else to know about that, then you wouldn't want to get close enough to that person for them to be able to tell that your feet are smelly. And I feel like the importance of vulnerability is that without vulnerability, we can never really get close to each other, because we never want to get close enough for people to actually see us for who we are.
Yeah. So there's a backstory. In high school, I had really smelly feet.
It's actually a thing.
Yeah, and the reason why is because I only had one pair of shoes, and I was an athlete, so I always ran around, and I got like sweaty, and the shoes got smelly, and I never like Febrezed them. I never did anything, and so I always knew I had smelly feet. Other people knew too, but actually I wasn't vulnerable with it, and eventually, like I was a sophomore in college. Someone like made a comment about like my smelly feet. It's like, oh yeah, there's nothing I can do. I have smelly feet. They're like, oh, have you ever tried spraying Febreze in your shoes? And I was like, does that like work? They're like, yeah, totally. So I did it, and now I don't have smelly feet anymore. So it's like I wasn't the most vulnerable, but just like talking to one person about it, literally, I don't have smelly feet anymore, because now I know if your shoes start smelling, you can spray Febreze in them.
Let's get an endorsement from Febreze for this podcast.
Yeah, let's do that. But let's start wrapping up.
Yeah.
Michaela, I wanted, you know this by now. This is your third time being here. What is one thing that you would like people to walk away from this conversation with, if you had to just pick one single thing?
I think my challenge would be to encourage people to look beyond what's considered good enough in our society, by you, by your friends, and strive, to do good that's beyond what you would consider good enough. Yeah. Love
it. Yeah. I feel like my encouragement is pretty similar. And you've heard me say this before, but just choose that one time when an opportunity comes up. Just choose to do the good thing. And then the next time an opportunity comes up, just choose to do the good thing.
Choose to do the dishes.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that can be, something that helps build momentum, right? Yeah. But just choose to do it, because that opportunity is not in a vacuum. That opportunity is something that does very much have a chance to be like identity forming for you, even if it's just doing the dishes. So just choose once to do it, and then just choose to do it again. But yes, that is pretty much it for today's podcast. Michaela, thank you so much for joining me again. Next week, I will have another host joining me. It will be another mentor of mine. His name is Steve Butchie. If you don't know who that person is, you are in for a treat. He is an incredible person. I'm super excited to be talking with him. We'll be talking about another G word. We talked about growth. Now we talked about good. We're talking about the word gratitude next week. So that is one that I am very much looking forward to. So keep an eye or an ear or whatever out for that. And Michaela, thank you so much. I'm definitely going to have you back again. So this is not like a goodbye. Just might have to be like on a Saturday instead of a Wednesday, because you're going to be teaching classes. But I know that our listeners definitely, by the time they're listening to this, they are totally in love with you because you are an amazing person. And I am really looking forward to the next time that I get to have you back on this podcast.
All right, back high five.
All right, boom. All right, that's like one of our favorite things. Well, one of my favorite things. All right, but yes, that is the end of this podcast. So, hey, if this podcast has encouraged you in any way, like, let me know. It is so encouraging for me to know that this is encouraging for you. So if that is the case, please let me know. Again, the email for this podcast is podcastabetterstory@gmail.com. because abetterstorypodcast@gmail.com was already taken. So podcastabetterstory@gmail.com. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can go ahead and leave a comment in the comment section below. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you are down for that type of thing. Hit that like button, anything that lets me know that you enjoyed this. But yeah, until next week, I hope that you have not just a good week, I hope you have a great week. I hope you make just one choice to make a good decision or a good choice or a positive impact in someone's life. But have a fantastic week. I will see you next week.
And watch out for bears. And that's one of my favorite things.